Chapter 9, Rachel's Story. Look, none of us are perfect, Rachel began, but we all have goodness within us. Some of us take longer to find it than others. Rachel wiggled down into her chair and picked up her drink. It was as if she was slinking down to get comfortable to watch a long movie. Julie, these girls have heard a lot of my story. Hell, they've lived most of my story. I was the woman who led two lives. I was the perfect wife and mother. You know, the one who had the best maid on the block, but the house always smelled like a bakery because I was always home baking cookies while the kiddies were at school. I played bridge or mahjong with the girls in the morning and shuttled my boys to various after-school activities every afternoon, dropping them off while I ran for a manicure or a massage. That was unless they had a game, then I would stay to watch. Otherwise, I'd pick them up and bring them home and get them started on homework while I started on dinner. Extracurricular activities were a big thing in our house. We made our boys take music lessons, and they played Little League baseball and soccer. Eric played piano, trumpet, and Larry played piano and guitar. School was something we took very seriously. We had all kinds of rules about homework and grades. We knew the boys were both very bright, so anything less than a B was unacceptable. Rachel was talking as fast as she could. There was no dating unless we met the girl first, and she had to be Jewish. They had chores and other household responsibilities. They were not permitted to get jobs because school was their job. Linda, Debbie, and Beth sat there nodding their heads, yet expressing some sort of hidden meaning behind their agreement. Julie couldn't quite figure it out. Were they in disagreement with her assessment? Was Rachel painting a fictitious picture? Julie's resentment flag went up. She had a problem with always feeling judged by other women, and Rachel had just finished describing her own life, almost exactly, except that she didn't care for mahjong. No, there's something more here. Beth interrupted. Come on, Rachel, get to the good part. Julie thought that was the good part. Tell her about the other side of your world. Okay, so the truth is, my husband gave me a very good life. He was a surgeon, a cardiac surgeon. He made big bucks, and we lived very comfortably. What does she mean he gave her a good life, was a surgeon, made big bucks? Rachel seemed to get more and more uneasy, shifting back and forth in her chair. I didn't always bake cookies. I bought them. In fact, I spent very little time at home in the mornings. Rachel cleared her throat. See, in my younger days, I was a real beauty. I was stacked and sexy, and I got a lot of attention. It seems I wasn't the best at keeping my wedding vows either. That last statement evoked a chuckle from the other three. It was more than a chuckle. Really, Rachel? Linda was indignant. I have a shit for a husband, and I never did some of the things you did. Okay, so I was unfaithful. Rachel knew she had touched a sore spot. I'm sorry, Linda. She reached across the table and squeezed her friend's hand. The truth is, I was so bored. Ronnie wouldn't consider letting me get a job. He told me I didn't need to work, that I should do whatever I want, live the life of Riley, whatever that means. She hung her head. After an awkward silence, she continued. Ronnie said I should volunteer with a nonprofit, be one of those ladies who lunch. He gave me a laundry list of organizations. He even suggested that I become a friendly visitor at a hospital or a nursing home. Rachel took a long, slow sip of her wine. Not for me. It didn't stroke my ego. Okay, I admit it. I was full of myself. I was too concerned with what people thought of how I looked, and it made me feel good when I got attention from all those gold-digging young men. Rachel got quiet for a second. Truth is, I wasn't used to all the attention. As a kid, I was a chubster and got a lot of teasing. I didn't have the boyfriends, the parties, or the fun. So when the opportunity came up, I grabbed it. She blushed a little, but went on. I had a few extramarital encounters. So what? Ronnie never knew. It didn't stop me from loving him. In fact, it made me more available to him. Julie was mesmerized. In my wildest fantasies, I never once thought of stepping out on Morty. Her low opinion of herself would stop her. She honestly didn't think anyone else would want her or have her or take her passionately. on the beach or in the back room of a bar or anywhere else her boring imagination could think of. It was Debbie's turn. Rachel, having been on the other end of it, I have to tell you that even if Ronnie didn't know, somebody close to you did know. Your boys knew something wasn't right. If nothing else, they knew the difference between homemade cookies and Chips Ahoy. Rachel laughed. I'm still a damn good baker. Rachel swirled what was left in her wine glass around for a few seconds. I got my just reward in the end. She put the glass down on the table. When the boys left for college and we were left alone in that big house, Ronnie wanted to sell it and move closer to the hospital. That way he figured we could have more time together. He wouldn't have to leave as early in the morning and would get home earlier in the evening. Putting the glass back on the table, Rachel sat back in her chair. She dropped her shoulders as if she were folding herself up in a neat little package. Julie was confused. She didn't know what was meant by just reward and wasn't getting any signals from any of the other three. How so, Rachel? Immediately, she realized that her timing was off. This was not the time to ask her to go on. Oh, geez, she's crying. Debbie put her finger to her lips and then whispered over to Julie, Give her a minute. The 5 women sat in silence for about 2 minutes, interrupted only by a waitress who stopped by and asked if they were ready for another round. They declined. Linda said, Give us a few minutes, okay? Julie took the time for some introspection. In my entire marriage, I never once thought of stepping out on Morty. Lord knows he made me feel like I was non-existent in his world. He was often so self-absorbed that he didn't even notice I was in the room, for God's sakes. I don't think there was ever another woman, unless... Nah, not my Morty. But he sure didn't show any interest in me, either socially or even in the bedroom. God, even when I did try to seduce him, it was like I had to frickin' hit him over the head. I remember that one time when I met him at the door with a cocktail wearing nothing but a black negligee, and he told me he only had 10 minutes because he had a frickin' racquetball game set up with this guy Lenny. Oh, yeah, I was so mad. Finally, Rachel rejoined the party. I guess there really is such a thing as karma. We moved closer to the hospital, which meant we moved away from my other life. It was then that I became the good little wife that Ronnie thought I had been all along. We bought this magnificent condo, the works, including marble floors and in some rooms, marble walls, for God's sakes. We had a kitchen that a professional chef would kill for. We had a superb library and entertainment room, 2 guest rooms for the kids when they came home. There's a doorman, a gym, and a spa in the basement of the building. There's even a hairdresser and barbershop in the lobby. It's like hotel living. So what's so bad about that? Now, Julie was really bewildered. You have this beautiful place. Now you were being true to your marriage. I don't get it. You didn't tell him, did you? Rachel clammed up again. Want me to continue? Beth asked Rachel. Rachel slightly nodded her head. Both the boys went on to medical school and everything was fine. For a few years, Rachel made some new friends, wives of doctors and all. She did finally get involved with a couple of agencies on a volunteer basis. Beth looked over at Rachel for approval. And then it happened. What? What happened? Julie had no idea where this was going. Ronnie dropped dead. Gasping, Julie could hardly find the words. Oh no, I'm so sorry. What happened? Of all things, Beth continued, Ronnie had a massive coronary. You know, the one they call the Widowmaker. He was only in his late 50s and it had no warning. They told Rachel that it must have been a congenital defect because being a cardiologist, he naturally would have taken good care of himself. Go ahead. Rachel was still slumped in her chair. They found him in the doctor's lounge. He had been with a young nurse. They only know that because they found him only half dressed. There was an investigation and Rachel asked for an autopsy. The nurse finally admitted that they had been doing it when he grabbed his chest. See what I meant by karma? Rachel wiped a tear away and picked up the wine glass, which had only a small mouthful remaining. At any rate, I missed out on a lot, but I caused a lot. I had no idea he was unfaithful, but then I don't think he knew I was sleeping around either. I loved Ronnie. I really did. I still feel so guilty over the life I had been leading. Sometimes, even today, I can't look at myself in the mirror. But that was in the past, Rachel. You didn't kill him. Julie tried to offer some solace. You changed your whole life around before that even happened. I learned a huge lesson. Rachel's introspection yielded to a sermon. The one great lesson I think I learned here is like old Uncle Billy said. Who's Uncle Billy? Julie asked innocently. When the boys took advanced placement English in high school, their teacher used to refer to Shakespeare as Uncle Billy. So, as Uncle Billy said, to thine own self be true. And if I'm ever bored again, I need to do something for the betterment of someone other than myself. It's much more rewarding. Like the golden rule, not that I'm a Jesus freak or anything, but do unto others, you know? My boys still don't know the truth about either their father or me, and I pray they never do. They are both within a breath of taking their medical boards, and I don't want to mess that up. Someday I'll tell them at least my side of the story. I only want them to learn from my mistakes. I don't ever want them to know anything about the circumstances of their father's death. They should only have good memories of Ronnie. Rachel seemed exhausted. Like I said, we're not one of us perfect. I believe to this day that Ronnie loved me in a way he loved no other woman. The hospital antics were just that, antics. I'll never know, nor do I want to, if that was the only time he was fooling around on me. I do know that we were pretty good parents, but even there we made our mistakes. You know, you can't be too lenient or too strict with kids. They need to make their own way and find themselves. Rachel picked up her nearly empty wine glass, swirled it around, and finished it off. Here's a perfect example. Let me tell you a funny story about my oldest son when we first took him to school. It kind of ties into that whole thing about teaching them to make their own way. Julie said, "Please do. This was getting a little intense." Well, we thought we had prepared our children for college. When the time came, we found out that in several small but significant ways, we had failed. More than once. Their entire lives, she repeated. We had stressed the importance of education without stressing them out. Our intent was to teach them to put their maximum effort in, and that would certainly be good enough because, as with most parents, we saw our children as brilliant. They both took school seriously, excelling in advanced placement classes, and scored quite well on college entrance exams. They both were extremely active in extracurricular activities, clubs, and sports. Their social lives were vibrant. What I didn't tell you was that we had also spent a lot of time talking about college on a different level. As important as classes were, Ronnie and I both felt it was equally important that they grow emotionally and socially, learning to make good decisions and learning to rely on themselves. When Eric was accepted to 6 out of 8 colleges to which he applied and waitlisted on one, he chose to attend Georgetown University. We packed with great anticipation to take him there for the new student orientation. After our arrival in Washington, we went our separate ways, he with the students and us with the parents. He would learn Hoya cheers and get a tour of the campus. We would learn about academics and student safety in Georgetown. We weren't to connect again until dinner. He would settle into a dorm room for the 2 days, and we checked into a nearby hotel. Midway through the afternoon, I got a text from him. "Hey, Mom, I forgot to pack underwear." That was our first clue that he wasn't ready. I calmly stopped at a store, bought some underwear for him, and discreetly put it in the top of his overnight bag with a note that said, "This is the last time I'm covering your behind. Love, Ma." We delivered the bag to him at dinner without a word about his faux pas. All 4 of the girls laughed out loud. Seeing it as a good time to interrupt, the waitress came by with a second round of drinks. "It's happy hour still, so I owe you these." The next morning, he was to meet his registration counselor at 9 a.m. We arrived at 8:30, grabbed a sorely needed cup of coffee, and began anxiously to wait. I knew which direction he would be coming from, and he would be carrying a neon orange bag, so I could spot him quickly. Rachel paused as if she was reliving the moment. This is the hard-to-let-go mothering instinct that was still obviously very strong in me. Ronnie sat and read the paper. When Eric hadn't shown up by 9:05, I was sure I had done a terrible job in preparing him to be on his own. At that moment, he came bouncing out of the registrar's office with a grin that lit up the entire west side of the campus. He was already registered and raring to go. "Okay, so maybe he was ready. Later that morning, we went to work on his dorm room. The next step was stocking his pantry. This was my final moment to shine. We went up and down the aisles of the grocery store, and since he had very little idea of what he wanted, much less what he would need, he pretty much left it up to me. When I picked up a package of baggies, he wanted to know in what aisle he might find the twist ties. Okay, one step forward, two steps back. We dropped everything off and then took him to dinner. The next morning, we took him to breakfast one last time. When we dropped him off, we met his roommates and turned on our heels to leave. Ha, I bet you thought I was going to talk about long, tearful goodbyes. Rachel took pride in being a tough cookie. Her demeanor only faltered when she found weakness in herself with which she couldn't come to terms. Well, I made my mind up not to look back, as did he, but I was choking on my tears before we even got out of the dormitory driveway. 15 minutes down the highway, I said to Ronnie, "Why hasn't he called yet?" Typical Jewish mother, eh? Rachel took a big swallow of her wine. Oof, I better slow down with this. She put the glass on the table and mockingly pushed it away from her. So the end of the story is that 2 years later, after Ronnie was gone, when I had to go through the same motions with Larry, same university, same orientation, and same text, forgot to pack underwear. And there it was, that same loud cackling and chuckling. "You never told me that story, Rachel," Linda squealed. "I would have loved hearing that when my kids were getting ready for school." Of course, Larry was a totally different kind of kid all along. He always seemed to march to his own beat, you know? Rachel sat back in her chair and glanced up for a few seconds, leaving the conversation temporarily, as if she was having an outer body experience. Her eyes glazed over, but nobody was able to determine if she was lost in thought, drunk, or having some sort of seizure. The four women watched her quietly for a few more seconds before they were interrupted by yet a new server who broke the silence. "You girls ready for another round?" This tiny little girl startled all five women at once with her shrill voice. "My turn," called Rachel. Rachel looked to Julie as though she needed a drink more than the others, so she wasn't about to argue. "Please, yes, we'll all have another of the same, thanks." The server spun on her heels. "Oh," Rachel bellowed. "And some more of these pretzels, please." The server kept her spin to complete the full 360 with a thumbs up. "They're really nice here. Don't get service like this for so cheap in New York." Julie was dumbfounded. "You find this place inexpensive? Maybe I need to pay more attention to the bills Morty pays. If I want to book a hotel room near Broadway for a friend, I always have to tell them it's upwards of $500. And a drink?" Rachel was used to paying Manhattan prices. Forget it. "Things must be really expensive in New York. How much do you pay for a pack of cigarettes?" It was Linda's turn. "None of us smoke anymore, so we don't really know. But the machines in the bars charge $13 a pack, I think." Linda continued. "I haven't bought cigarettes in almost 6 years. "That's terrific. I've tried to quit 1,000 times," began Julie. "I have no willpower. Can't quit cigarettes, got hooked on digital games, and don't put anything chocolate in front of me. That's my biggest indulgence. Why am I telling these total strangers all this stuff about me? I don't know them, and I'll never see them again. What is wrong with me?" A stern look came over Linda's face. "Do not compare cigarettes with chocolate or video games. They are entirely different." She threw herself back in her chair just as the server returned to their corner table. Under her breath, she muttered, "What is this girl? An idiot?" The server slid the tray onto the edge of the table and, noticing the quiet, silently and gently placed the appropriate drinks in front of each of the women. Almost afraid to speak, she faltered, "Do you want the check now?" "Not yet," Rachel snapped. "We may not be finished. In fact, it looks like we have a lot more to do. We'll need menus." "Okay, just let me know." The server cut away from the table like an ice hockey player dodging an opponent and made her way back to the bar. Julie had heard what Linda had said. What the hell did I say? How am I supposed to know what's off limits? I only met the bitch tonight. She decided to mollify the situation anyway. "I'm sorry if I said something to offend you. I didn't mean anything by it." Beth reached over and rested her hand on Linda's arm. The two women had a lot of emotions in common, although for different reasons, and understood more than anyone else why she had reacted so vehemently in the conversation. She leaned over and whispered to Linda that she shouldn't take what Julie said and insert it into her own personal context. She couldn't possibly be making light of a situation she knows nothing about, right? Linda gently nodded and then looked at Julie. I'm so sorry, hun. I'm always too raw when people talk about smoking. Let me tell you why.